Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met ASEAN Secretary General Hourn and Thailand Prime Minister on the sidelines of the ASEAN-Australia Special Summit in Melbourne. Australia is hosting the three-day summit to mark 50 years of becoming ASEAN's first external partner. Australia is looking to bolster ties with the fast-growing region as China looks to increase its diplomatic and military reach. An official welcome dinner will be held for all leaders on Tuesday evening ahead of the meeting on Wednesday. A technical glitch in his military aircraft forced New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon to reach the ASEAN summit in Australia in a commercial flight. His flight was slated to take off from the capital Wellington on Tuesday morning, but a maintenance check before the takeoff found an electrical fault in the aircraft. The Prime Minister's office confirmed that Luxon boarded a commercial flight to Melbourne. As a result of the delay, Luxon could miss his meetings with Philippines President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Laos President. On the sidelines of the summit, of course. A technical glitch in his military aircraft forced New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon to reach the ASEAN summit in Australia in a commercial flight. His flight was slated to take off from the capital Wellington on Tuesday morning, but a maintenance check before the takeoff found an electrical fault in the aircraft. The Prime Minister's office confirmed that Luxon boarded a commercial flight to Melbourne. As a result of the delay, Luxon could miss his meetings with Philippines President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Laos President. On the sidelines of the summit, of course. Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong said Southeast Asian countries are aiming for an agreement with Beijing on a code of conduct in the South China Sea. But he added that the agreement will take time as some difficult issues are yet to be resolved. Lee was speaking alongside Australia Prime Minister Anthony Albanese at the ASEAN Special Summit in Melbourne. Australian Prime Minister said that Canberra always supports the freedom of navigation through the South China Sea. Both leaders also said the outcome of the US elections should be respected. The Philippines has blamed the Chinese Coast Guard for dangerous maneuvers. It alleged that they caused a collision with its vessel that was on a resupply mission for its troops in the South China Sea. China's Coast Guard claimed it took appropriate measures against Philippine vessels that intruded into the waters adjacent to the Second Thomas Shoal, a disputed toll in the South China Sea. Beijing claims sovereignty over most of the South China Sea. It is a claim that cuts into the exclusive economic zones of Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia. In 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration found that China's claims had no legal basis. China kicked off its biggest political event of the year on Monday. The political conclave was kick-started with a meeting of the People's Political Consultative Conference that is attended by top leadership, including Xi Jinping. At the conclave, Beijing sought to put on a carefully choreographed display of national unity. China said it will resolutely oppose separatist activities aimed at Taiwan independence and external interference. It also said it will implement a private pension system across the country. Amid complicated diplomatic relations with India, Maldives signed a defense agreement with China to boost bilateral ties with their Asian superpower. In a social media post, Its defense ministry said Maldives has signed an agreement with China for free military assistance. The deal was signed on Monday, just weeks after Maldives President Mohamed Muizzu set a deadline for Indian military troops to withdraw from the country. The island nation's deal with China furthers Muizzu's pro-China tilt. The military cooperation deal is the latest in a slew of agreements signed between the countries. In January, Maldives and China signed 20 agreements that also included accelerated cooperation on China's Belt and Road Initiative. An Indian national was killed and two others from India were injured when an anti-tank missile fired from Lebanon struck an orchard near Israel's border. All three belong to India's southern state of Kerala. A Ramadan truce could head off a threatened Israeli assault on Rafah, the town in southern Gaza where over half the population has taken shelter. Palestine authorities said 118 people were killed last Thursday while trying to get food for their families from an aid convoy. Gaza residents described heavy fighting since the weekend just north of Rafah in Khan Yunis. In Rafah, nightly airstrikes are killing people in their homes. Health officials said another Israeli airstrike near a hospital in Khan Yunis killed 10 people late on Monday. The Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, who is on a visit to South Korea, met the Director of National Security. S. Jaishankar posted on social media platform X that the two sides had a useful discussion on shared convergences in the Indo-Pacific and contemporary regional and global issues. Hamas and Egyptian mediators say they are going ahead with talks in Cairo on securing a ceasefire in Gaza. Israel has decided against sending a delegation. Washington is pressing for a truce, the release of hostages and plan to stop the humanitarian catastrophe. The ceasefire talks are billed as a final hurdle to secure a ceasefire in time for the Muslim fasting month of Ramadan that starts on Sunday. Israel has declined to comment publicly on the Cairo talks. Two Egyptian security sources said mediators were in touch with the Israelis, allowing negotiations to continue despite their absence. A Palestinian source said the discussions were uneasy, with Israel sticking to its demand for only a temporary truce to free hostages. Three undersea cables were cut in the Red Sea. As a result, global internet and telecommunication traffic of Asia, including India, Europe and the Middle East, had to be rerouted. The Red Sea is the chief target for Yemen's Houthi rebels, but what led to the severed lines remains unclear. The Houthis have denied attacking the lines. Global shipping has been disrupted through the Red Sea, a crucial route for cargo and energy shipments from Asia to West Asia to Europe. The sabotage of telecommunication lines could further escalate the months-long crisis. Ongoing gang violence escalated tensions in the Caribbean nation of Haiti. Authorities imposed a state of emergency in the face of the unrest led by gang leader Jimmy Cherizier, also known as Barbecue. Capital has been shut down, with residents stepping out only for essentials. The gang leaders are calling for the dismissal of Prime Minister Ariel Henry. On Monday, armed gunmen tried to seize control of Haiti's main international airport in Port-au-Prince. Gunfire was exchanged with police personnel in the latest attack on key government sites. Ghana is poised to pass an anti-LGBTQ law that is threatening to derail the prospects of international aid for the West African nation. Ghana's parliament passed the bill last week. Ghana's finance ministry has flagged concerns, saying the anti-LGBTQ bill could lead to a loss of $3.8 billion in World Bank financing over the next 5 to 6 years. It will further derail the $3 billion loan package of the International Monetary Fund. Then the bill will become a law after President Nana Akufo-Addo signs it. Ghana's parliament unanimously passed the anti-LGBTQ bill on 28th of February. The legislation will intensify the crackdown on the rights of queer community accused of promoting LGBTQ identities. According to the finance ministry, the anti-LGBTQ bill will impact Ghana's foreign exchange reserves. Heavy rains caused a river in Bolivia's La Paz to burst its banks on Monday. The rain fury wreaked havoc in the South American nation, due to which at least 43 people lost their lives. A torrent of muddy water turned the Aruntaya into a rushing river, dragging heavy machinery on its path and forcing operators to flee the site of the landslide. The Civil Defense Ministry said the La Paz region will be on red alert till 11th of March. Vietnam's capital, Hanoi, has topped the list of the world's most polluted metropolitan areas. The Swiss air quality monitoring firm IQ Air published these rankings. The data comes even as Hanoi is covered in a thick blanket of smog, drastically reducing visibility. The smog was caused by cold and damp weather that trapped airborne pollutants. According to 2021's World Bank report, road dust and vehicle emissions from the city's roughly 8 million registered vehicles account for 30% of the air particulate pollution in Hanoi. Accra in Ghana and Tehran were the second and third worst in the pollution lists, with AQIs of 167 and 166 respectively. A score of 0 to 50 is counted as good in the Swiss company's ranking system. The United Nations has warned that Africa will be $2.5 trillion short of the finance that it needs to cope with climate change by 2030. According to a United Nations Economic Commission, for Africa, the continent gets only 2% of global investments in clean energy. Africa needs an actual investment of $2.8 trillion by 2030. Last year, a report by the UN and African Union highlighted that each African citizen produced 1.04 tons of carbon dioxide emissions in 2021, less than a quarter of the global average. The report also said the average rate of warming in Africa is 0.3 degrees Celsius per decade in 1981 to 2022. Several senior UN officials and climate activists have called for global financial architecture reform. Apple has been fined a staggering $2 billion by the European Union for breaking the bloc's competition laws. The tech giant has been found guilty of using unfair methods to promote its own music streaming service over its rivals. The European Commission's decision was triggered by a 2019 complaint by Spotify. Spotify alleged that Apple abused its dominant position and wrongfully levied 30% App Store fees to stifle its competition. At the time of investigation, it was discovered that Apple banned streaming services from telling users about their cheaper payment options. Meanwhile, Apple has criticized EU's decision. The tech giant said it will challenge the same in the court. Oil prices fell for a second consecutive day due to concerns over China's economic transformation amidst slower growth. Post-COVID, Brent futures dropped to $82.48 a barrel, while WTI fell to $78.33. China aims for a 2024 growth target of 5%, similar to last year, but achieving it may be challenging due to the base effect of COVID-affected 2022. While supply factors and geopolitical tensions support prices, concerns over Chinese demand and an expected increase in US crude inventories weigh on sentiment. OPEC Plus extended oil output cuts, but market dynamics remain uncertain amid improving fundamentals and supply disruptions. Home prices in India are expected to rise by 7% this year and the next year, driven by luxury property purchases. Despite the Reserve Bank of India's interest rate hikes, the housing market remains strong, with prices increasing by 4.3% in 2023. However, this poses challenges for segments with stagnant wages and poverty. Demand for luxury properties is expected to grow, leading developers to focus on premium projects, exacerbating the shortage of affordable homes. Although the gap between demand and supply for affordable housing is expected to persist, expectations of interest rate cuts may improve affordability. The US Securities and Exchange Commission has once again postponed its ruling on BlackRock's request for approval of its Ethereum Exchange Traded Fund (ETF), as revealed in a regulatory filing on Monday. BlackRock initially submitted its application for the shares Ethereum Trust in November last year, with plans for it to be listed on the Nasdaq if accepted. Ethereum, the second largest cryptocurrency in terms of market capitalization, is the focus of this ETF application. Previously, in January, the SEC deferred its decision on BlackRock's application following its approval of various Bitcoin ETFs. A spot crypto ETF, such as the one BlackRock is seeking approval for, would monitor the market value of the underlying digital asset, providing investors with exposure to the token without requiring them to directly purchase the currency.